Welcome back, everybody, and thank you very much for tuning in once more. So today I am blessed to have another guest with me on my podcast. I want to take a few minutes, or rather, actually, I'm going to let him do that. But very briefly, I'd like to welcome Harjcheems, who runs a company called Kartar Advisory. And he is somebody that actually I came across about a year ago, actually, prior to lockdown. Believe it or not, in a field very well away from business. It was actually on a football pitch. But we're going to discuss that a bit later. Welcome on board, Haj. What can I say? It's been some year.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. You're right. It's well, thank you for having me. First of all, really appreciate that, and hopefully we'll be able to play football again very shortly. I think it's 3 or 4 weeks away, so time to get the legs moving again. But we'll do this for now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, bar a few injuries, I think we'll be absolutely fine. Yeah. So, Haj, look, I mean, I know you recently. Well, you set up a company some time ago.
Yeah.
But just wanted to get you on board today to discuss and just share some thoughts, really, business to business. Yeah. One of the things that I think a lot of users and a lot of business owners initially have misconceptions around is what we call the reality versus expectation.
Yeah.
And I've been there. You've most definitely been there. But before we sort of get into that. How about you just introduce yourself and exactly what does Kartar Advisory do?
Yeah, so my background has always been in sales, specifically in tech sales, working in the B2B space. I've done sales now for around 13 years, maybe 13 or 14 years, including obviously my work with my own company. And I think when you're from a sales background, you have to be quite entrepreneurial anyway, if that makes sense. Often most sales roles are you're running a business within a business, and so as a result of various changes in my life and things like that, I ended up working for myself. And what I aim to do with the business is really to bring on commercial skills within other companies, whether they're small companies or maybe they are startups that are more focused on building the technology and haven't yet got a sales function, for example, or whether they are maybe businesses that are in a really old school, maybe traditional field, and so haven't necessarily adapted to what's out there in terms of best practice from a sales perspective. The intention of my business was to go out and find these companies and help them and upskill them with their sales functions and their sales teams. Not just necessarily from a training perspective, that's just one part of it, but also just generally consulting, having a look at their entire sales function from a bit of an outsider's view and understanding where they might be missing things and where they might not. Because I think people have this conception that sales is just a personality thing. When actually there's a lot more to it, and there are a lot of things that can be passed on to people irrespective of personality.
Definitely. And I think now that you touched on sort of sales, I mean, every business has to go through a process where there has to be an element of sales to it. Because Correct. Obviously without any sales, we don't have business. And one of the things that I've always I'd say I've always had a bit of a thing against is when the core value of the business, the sort of direction, the leadership of the business is unable to replicate what it expects staff to go out and do, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So, one of the things is you as a business owner yourself, if you don't know how to make sales, how can you obviously expect your team to go out and do sales? So how important is it for a business owner to not only have a great idea, but be able to execute those skills to the highest level? I mean, for me, I've always felt it's crucial. And when I was setting up businesses, I always felt it was the most important thing, because if I could not, for example, close a deal, how could I expect my staff to close a deal?
Yeah. So, I think it's interesting because the companies that I've worked with through my company have tended to be very focused on the tech side, but that's mainly due to the build-up of the skill set of the teams that they have, right? They build a product and then they take the product to market. And I think, like I said, I think sometimes there is a conflict between tech and sales, And there might be a conception on the tech side that if we build a really great product, it will sell itself. But you can see that there are a lot of average products out there that do really, really well simply because they have very, very effective sales teams. So I think selling, you're right. I think selling is something that needs to be instilled across the organization, whether you're a 5-person business or a 5,000-person business. Everyone within that business will have some element of exposure to the outside world, right? Whether it be through their own families, their friends, whatever it may be. And you never know when you're having a conversation with someone who might be one day a really important customer for you, right? And network is really important and things like that. So I think selling is really critical, like all the way from the top through to the actual salespeople. I think if everyone has that mindset of every conversation might be an opportunity, then you see companies that adopt that mindset grow quickly.
Definitely. And I mean, obviously, product is key when you're in sales. I mean, I worked in companies before I set up on my own where we had products which were not necessarily very good. And you get to a stage, I think, where you lose confidence in what you're selling. And from a Kartar advisory perspective, what is it sort of unique sort of about your products, or what gives you the confidence to know that you can go out and sort of make those sales, with confidence, I guess?
So the way I work with my clients is I try and understand, there's two ways you can understand the product, right? You can just understand it from a speeds and feeds perspective, right? It will do this quickly and it will improve this, or what I think ideally you want to understand is the value that it ultimately will deliver to customers, right? Because a product or a service, whichever it is, has to really be able to do one of 4 things at least, right? If not a couple, to show some benefit to the customer, right? It either has to grow their revenue, or it either has to reduce their costs. It either has to improve an existing process that they already have that is inefficient and make it more streamlined, or whatever it may be. Or it has to reduce some element of risk or exposure they might have in the market if there's some sort of legislation coming or changes on the horizon, right? Now, if it doesn't do any of those 4 things, it's very difficult to justify selling that product, and indeed as a customer buying that product, right? If it's not going to help me grow my revenue, if it's not going to reduce any costs, not going to make anything efficient, and it's not going to limit any potential exposure, well, then it's really just a vanity project. So I always try and make people think from that perspective. So when I work with my clients who might be technical and might be looking at their products and services purely from a technical perspective, I try and say, look, from this perspective, this is what's going to get people interested in having a conversation with you, because then that means something to them.
Sure. And I mean, it's interesting you say that, because obviously I think in a world today where startups are probably at their peak, not just, we could say it's probably down to the pandemic and people having that sort of an additional motivation to go out and explore opportunities. But I think we're living in a world where we as human beings are not as scared now to go out and try an opportunity or try and bring an idea to life, which leads me to, when you're going up in numbers in that sense, where, you're going to have loads of startup businesses around you, it's so important to make sure that you are delivering something that adds value. And that's sort of what you just touched on now. And one of the things with Swim Inspire that, we set up was initially about adding value to a customer, because let's be honest, you can give all the business advice to a business, but if it's not tailor-made or specific to that person, that's not how business runs. Because one of the things that when I was getting into the world of business, was that I was reading textbooks and sort of other people's biographies and trying to replicate all of that into my life, opposed to taking out what actually was applicable and was actually reachable. So I couldn't, for example, be a Steve Jobs from the beginning. Do you know what I mean? You have to build yourself into a role. And how important would you say it is for business people, or those who have an idea and want to sort of make that transition of it into a business or a career? How important is it to actually set small but realistic goals to start with?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely crucial because it can be really overwhelming. Like there's like there's anyone who starts something, whether it be a business or any kind of dream, right? It's always the end goal that's the most inspiring thing, right? The vision of like, I'll have this great company and loads of revenue and loads of
Sure.
money or whatever it may be, or
Yeah.
whatever the dream is,
And we've
right?
all been there. We've all been there, right?
Of, of course, and you need it, right? Because that's going to drive you through, right? That's just like the nature of humans, right? We all have dreams. But the overwhelming bit is the bit that's in the middle, like how do you actually get there? And I think that one of the things that when you start on your own, the thing that you learn either through experience or through practice or a bit of both, I guess, is that you have to take it one day at a time. Um, and the journey is definitely not going to be linear. And I think maybe when you start getting your first couple of setbacks and then you overcome those setbacks, that's when you start to think, okay, I have the end goal in mind, but actually the way I'm going to get there, there will be a plan, but it's going to change a lot, and I need to be adaptable and not too set in my ways, because it's not going to work out exactly how I expect it to work out. So I think having that view of like today might be a bad day and everything's going wrong. It's just a case of getting through to less stormy waters, as they say, I guess, and then going from there.
Definitely. And I think that kind of approach obviously comes with experience. And, you having had an ordinary job before you set up your business, and
Yeah,
really with myself. And I think it's when you go through that process, isn't it? This is what inspires people to start up a business, I guess, in some ways, because you look at all the things that you have been able to handle and you think, well, can I go up a bit? Can I take that bar a little bit higher?
yeah,
And that's where I find people then take that dive into business. But it is important to highlight, and it's one of the things that I most commonly see people struggling with making that transition.
yeah,
Is how different is a job from running your own business. So I know people who've had 6-figure salary sort of jobs before, and then when they've gone to start their own business, they've not been able to do it for
yeah,
one reason or another. And I think part of that is because you're so used to that kind of job mentality of delegating, having only working on certain aspects. But obviously, when you launch a business, it's you against all those aspects to initially start with.
yeah.
And I think that's where sort of people fall away or fall apart or fall out of love really with their idea. But how crucial is that sort of? And you've kind of answered this question already, but to sort of synopsize all that, how crucial is your first 5 years in business? Would you say? And obviously, you having been in that process, you're in your third or your fourth year now with Kartar Advisory.
Yeah.
But what would you say? How crucial are your first 5 years, and what sort of emotions as a businessman did you go through or are going through right now with that?
You go through all sorts. There's times where things are great and you make mistakes. There I set up deliberately as a limited company, and there's all sorts of business types out there, and it's really up to you as an individual to decide what you wanted to, which entity is right for you. But I decided to set up as a limited company, and I underestimated the amount of admin that would come with that. If that, I don't know if that's your experience as well, but I wouldn't change that now. Now that I'm in the, I decided to do it all myself for the first couple of years, and you make mistakes, you cop a couple of fines here and there, and
Sure.
and then you get into the rhythm of it. Paying yourself, doing the taxes, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, at some stage, as I will carry on growing a business, I will get an accountant and things like that. But at the moment, it's things like that like you said, you have to take care of all the different elements of the business. And it's important also to think of the business as a separate entity. Even though I'm the kind of owner director, I don't, I have a clear delineation between the business and myself. So, there's no bad practices like I'm not using the business as just a piggy bank for me. You know what I mean? I'm thinking
Sure.
about it like, okay, I'll pay myself this much, but I want to leave this in the bank for X, Y, or Z reason, and things like that. So there are aspects that you have to get good at quickly, that you will never have done before. I'm not very good at finance. Well, maybe I'm better than I give myself credit for, but it's not something that I enjoy doing, is what I'm saying. And and then there'll be times where you have clients, you have a full book, which I've experienced, and it's great. And then there's times where you have no clients, and you're like, okay, well, now I'm the clock's ticking on how long I can last.
Of course, and I think it's amazing that you say that, because it's sort of the emotions that I felt. And I mean, when I set up my my first company, which was the hospitality company that I'm still very much a part of now, and I remember we set up in 2014, and I think it came to about 2018, and I was sort of almost pulling my hair out, thinking, what am I doing with this here at the moment? It's been 4 years, and things aren't really moving, and it was almost as if God was sort of laughing at me, really, because I wished something, and then he gave it to me in such abundance that the next sort of 3 years the company went into a six-figure company. And it's amazing, because I love to hear about people who are in their first 5 years, because I like to see what sort of emotions they were going through, because I can relate to that, because I spent my first 4.5 years sort of almost, like I said, pulling my hair out, literally thinking, when's this business going to take off? And that's the thing, I think, with entrepreneurs and sort of being your own boss, because you get past all those phases. You get past feeling sorry for yourself. You get past rejections, almost to the point where you just think next, and that just becomes your motto. You're just kind of constantly egging yourself up always. And I think people don't realize that all of that negativity, all of those sort of uncertain moments are actually building your character, but are also building your company without you actually knowing. And I read somewhere that you're always going to be your worst critic, and if you are, that means you're doing something right, because even if something's going well, you're going to look at it as if it's not going well enough, so you're always going to be pushing that little bit further. I mean, have you found that with your business?
I agree 100%, because I think when you first start going through the downs of it, because the highs are great. Actually, this applies to both, right? I think, well, certainly in my experience, the highs, you start feeling like anything's possible. And then with the downs, you start feeling like, okay, this is all over. What am I doing? Why did I sign up to this? This is too hard. And I think what happens is, if you stick at it long enough, or you learn from that, is you start to look at both of them with a different perspective. Like, last May, I didn't have any clients, right? And that was the end of the start, the kind of first lockdown. And I had enough to kind of get me by financially, but you don't want to spend it, right? You want to build. And then I remember thinking back in July or something, I had lunch with a friend or dinner, and I said, I don't know whether to go back to work or whether to just keep pushing on. And he was like, no, I think, I know you'll be happy pushing on. Just keep going, and it will work out, right? And you have those times where you start doubting it, and then all of a sudden I picked up a client in October, gone really well, picked up another one very recently. It's going really, it's going to be good. But equally, now the highs are not like, this is it, now I've made it. Do you know what I mean? It's like no, there's still going to be challenges, but you take every challenge as it comes. I mean, you back yourself to fix it now. That's kind of the way you think about it. So like, you become a lot more even in your outlook, rather than riding the highs and the lows.
Almost like a coming of age, isn't it, really?
Yeah, like, you just become more detached. It's not like every time there's something good, you break out a bottle of champagne. And when something bad happens, you're ready to get the razor blades out. It's more like, if something good happens, you land a client, and give yourself a pat on the back, but then you think, actually, now the hard work begins, because I've got to go and do what I've got to deliver on this, right? And then when something bad happens, you think, okay, well, this might be an opportunity to change tact and change focus, or learn something new.
Definitely. I mean, it's interesting. It's very interesting actually hearing all this, because it's definitely part of a process. And I just wanted to, and you've kind of answered this already as well, but I'm interested to hear now more about this. Now that we've gone through all of that sort of set of questions, I just wanted to see where you were with the whole expectations versus the reality of a business. What tips would you have for those who have a great business idea and are thinking of implementing that into a business? I know for myself, one of the things that I constantly tell people is that you need to expect the unexpected from the beginning. A lot of people have and like you said a little bit, we have that vision where eyes closed, we picture ourselves in, a fancy car, nice house, I don't know, an Armani suit or something, and we think, that's going to be business. I mean, that very well could be business, don't get me wrong, but you're never really going to start up at that end of it, are you?
No, absolutely not. And I think in terms of expectations, like there's a couple of things that jump out. One is you've just got to do it, right? You've just got to take the leap, because otherwise you'll never get around to it. And the other one is, because I remember when I was thinking about it, I'd been made redundant. This was a few years ago, right? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, do you know, I'm just going to take the plunge. And when I actually, this is to go back to the point you were making originally, like rather than be overwhelmed by what the potential end goal could be, I just went, you know what? Just register the company. Just take the next step. And that's the thing that I've done I try to do every time I feel like I'm getting overwhelmed. I just think, just focus on the next step. So what I did was it was like, all I got to do today is register the company. I think it was like £12 and it's registered, right? It's really easy to do. Yeah. And then you just click a button, they send you an email and you're like, oh, wow, I'm a company director now, right? And you get a little buzz off that, which is great. And you should do. Then I was like, okay, now what's the next thing? I've got to get a website. Okay, build a website, teach myself how to build a website, blah, blah, blah. Then I was like, okay, now what's the next thing I need to do? Okay, maybe I need to start looking for some clients. Maybe I should build some messaging in terms of what I'm going to reach out to them and say. So just by focusing on the next step helped me manage my own expectations, but it made me move in a forward direction. But the other thing on the flip side of that is things will not go to plan. Sometimes the next step will just not work. You will be stuck on that step for a long, long time until you figure out which direction to go in. Things that you think will take a month will take 3 months or 6 months. You can double anything that you think is going to take a certain length of time. You can triple it, and that's something that you can definitely factor in. So then it's a question of managing your expectations and emotions. And if you have the sort of personality where, if you're in a job, right, and I'm pretty obsessed with my personal finances, I always have been for like the last, I think in sales you have to be, right, because you work on a basic and a commission. So as a salesperson, you get used to constantly looking at your salary, but you always have the fallback of the base, right? So if you're used to looking at your account and looking a year in the future, and you know how much money you're going to have a year in the future, well, great. Because in business, you're not going to know that. You know how much money you have today, and you could probably have a pretty good idea of how much money you're going to have at the end of the month, and probably a pretty good idea of how much money you're going to have at the end of the quarter. Beyond that, unless you've got an absolute cash cow customer that loves you to death, I wouldn't make any personal, I wouldn't be going out to buy a big Rolls Royce just yet, if that makes sense, right? Or signing up to any big credit agreements and things like that, because you just don't know. And I think it probably teaches you how to be a bit more financially responsible and savvy as well, just personally, as well as, if you have your own business.
Definitely. I mean, Rolls Royce is a push, Harj, to be honest with you. I mean, it took me about 4 or 5 years anyway. So just to get, 100%, like you said, anything that you kind of set out, I think you have to get comfortable. And one thing I've noticed, actually, I'm going to come back to the point about being comfortable, because with business people, there's this misconception. You hear sometimes people talking about their boss or whatever, he always says this, but it doesn't happen, or he hasn't done it. And I don't think people really understand that when you are in charge of such a sort of wide array of sort of projects, and kind of you are the head of each department initially to start with, right?
Yeah.
Everything takes time. Like you said, things don't happen overnight. You can't deliver things overnight. You can't make the changes overnight. There's so much compliance, red tape, everything to get around.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I sympathize with when I hear sort of workers talk about their managers in jobs, etc. I can relate to that. I
Yeah.
can relate to why that hasn't been done, or why that hasn't, certain thing hasn't been done. And one of the things that I also have noticed, Haj, as well, is that amongst your friend circle, when you are the average Joe, and you are in a whatever job, you may well be in a great job, or a substantial job, or even something that you don't like doing yourself, everyone is absolutely fine with you. The moment you sort of launch your business, it's almost like people run away like 15 steps, or just completely disappear, and you no longer feel like you've got this support. I mean, what is it that sort of causes that? I mean, maybe I'm just like asking a bit of a psychological question that you even don't have an answer to, but I mean, I have a theory which I'm going to share in a little bit, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on, why do friends, family, associates not support someone's business, but they would congratulate you on a new job, for example? Or if you put on your LinkedIn tomorrow, Harjcheems is now, I don't know, going to be working at Rolls Royce, you'd get about 50,000 people liking it, commenting, messaging you. But the moment you put on, Harjcheems is launching Kartar Advisory tomorrow again, and you'd probably find about only 25 people would, get in touch with you. Why is that ratio or that divide there? I mean, what causes that?
That's a really interesting point, and that's a really good example that you've used as well to bring it to life. Like, if I was to go back into employment, because I did actually go back into employment for a bit, just because it was a really good opportunity at the time. But now I don't have that mindset. Now I'm sticking with this all the way through, right? And you're right. If I change my LinkedIn tomorrow and put, Harjcheems account manager or sales director or whatever it might be, sales manager at XYZ Limited, I would probably get 100 well dones. And if it was to set up my own business, people would be less likely to do that. I don't know. I think it's like, I think there's an element of where everyone wants to ultimately be free, right? Like, and have their own decisions and be their own boss, right? Essentially, or a lot of people certainly do, right? No one likes the thought of working for someone else and being in this kind of like, you're compelled to go into an office for someone, work 9 to 5, and in exchange they give you some money every month, right? Like, at its very core, it's like, doesn't feel right, but we all do it. We just accept it. That's like kind of how society has conditioned us, right? And I think there's an element of like, when people start up on their own, maybe it's more of a reflection on them than it is on you, right? Like, maybe people are like, everyone has like their own dreams, right? No one's dream is to be like a finance analyst or something like that, right? You want to be like, I don't know, whatever, a singer or a dancer or a footballer or a business, whatever it may be, businesswoman, etc. It doesn't matter. So, but only like maybe 1 or 2% of people end up in following their own thing or being the masters of their own destiny. So I think when you see someone else do it, maybe it's an element of like a little bit hating, almost like, oh, I'm seeing that person give it a go, but I haven't made the jump myself. So it's more of a reflection on me than it is on them. I have far less work related conversations with people generally, because they for some reason people don't think I can relate to their working day. They'll be like, oh, the office this week, oh, the office that week, and I'm like, well, I'm not really moaning. I'm just, I'll be like, yeah, just get on with people. Like, what time do you finish? I'm like, I don't know, 9, 10. I finished work last night. Like, wow, that's crazy. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I also didn't start until 11 or whatever. Like, I'm like, I'm just at work all the time. I might chip in and do 3 hours here and then have it work, especially now with COVID, So I don't know, I've gone a bit long-winded there, but I think it does reflect on people sometimes thinking like, why haven't I done it?
Definitely. And I mean, I had this conversation with a friend of mine who was, sort of missing the point a little bit here about what we're talking about, but he was part of a multi-level marketing company. Started at the very grassroots of it back in 2014. And very, very nice lad, and he made it very, very big by 2016, 2017, and to the level where he has now launched his own company, which is trading in the millions, and he's done very, very well. And me, I guess this where business mind to business mind, you look at that person and you don't look at what they have, you just see their journey. really.
Yeah.
And you look at, I remember him from when he started off in a suit, which was almost like he was wearing his dad's suit.
Yeah.
Now, very crisp. But it's the personal growth of that person which really kind of sticks out for me. And we were having this chat last night, and we were just talking about. I remember you when you did this. I remember you when you did that, and we were just talking to each other about it. And it just sort of came to me, and I said to him, I said, I remember when you didn't even have £20 to come down to an international event, because that's what the ticket used to be. If you want to come to a mindset seminar, it's going to cost you. He didn't even have that. And I remember him, there used to be a group of them, and they used to chip in together, and whatever it was. And now I look at him, and I think like he rolls up in his Bentley to his offices in Brentford, lives in Canary Wharf, and does very, very well. He's a family man, has really set up his life nicely. And one of the things he said to me, Harj, was he said, people are too busy counting my success that they actually have forgotten to count my failures.
Yeah.
And I thought it was such a simple way, yet such a kind of positive stance to take on life.
Yeah.
Because it showed me also why he continues to grow now, is because he doesn't count his successes, he just keeps counting his failures.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, and it's a little bit like you're saying, when you have your bad days and you think, right, I've not done this well, it's something for me to learn, opposed to having an ego and thinking, no, I was right the whole way, there's nothing I need to change, the client was wrong. One of the things I've learned in business is your client is never wrong. Even when they're wrong, they're not wrong. You've got to accept that.
Yeah.
And that was a conversation I had with him. And, we started talking a little bit about myself, and we discussed, after the pandemic, we're going to sit down and really, have some drinks or something and have a chat about where we come from. But that was only, 2014 was what, 7 years ago, 7 years ago. So to look back and think, if you can achieve so much in 6-7 years without even trying to reach a goal, because he wasn't trying to reach a goal, he was just trying to get something going. And he said the best goal he's achieved in life is not setting himself a goal. So he didn't put that pressure on himself. He just said, I want to see how this goes, and I'm open to where it goes. And then he was speaking to me about it, and I said, it's very interesting, because I've actually never set myself a goal. When people say to me, what's your goal? I said, I don't really know, to be honest with you. But all I know is that today my reality is better than my dreams were some years back. And I think if you get to that stage in your life, imagine what would happen now with all the experience and everything that the fellow I'm talking about has. If he sets himself now a goal, can you imagine the amount of success he would have? Just because he sets himself a big goal. And one of the things he wants to do is he wants to make his company a 10 to 15 million a year turnover company.
Right.
And I believe genuinely he will do that, because he's already about 3 or 4 million. And that is without trying. He's got there just because he wanted to make something happen. But what if he really set himself a goal? So I guess where I'm coming to with that long-winded sort of discussion is, have you sort of set yourself goals, or have you just said, look, you know what, here I am, here's something I want to try, and let me just give it a go?
I'm like, I set a lot of goals in my personal life and work and whatever it may be. And what I've learned over the last few years is that it will never go to plan, right? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't necessarily have the goal. But it's that thing we were saying, whereas in your mind you put it down, you say, right, I'm gonna hit this, X amount of money or whatever, X weight or whatever it might be, right, by this time. The reality is that people are probably a little bit more optimistic about what they can achieve in a short period of time. I think there's an expression, right? People tend to overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but they underestimate what they can achieve in 5 years. Absolutely. So I've taken that more on board now. So it's not to say I don't have goals. Like, I do have an idea of where I want things to go ultimately.
Yeah.
And I do kind of have these rough timelines, but the focus is on the next step. Like, what is I need to do today? Get up. What do I need to do today? Get up. What do I need to do today? And then, you can look back and say, right, okay, now I'm closer, and you just do it that's one step at a time.
Definitely agree with you. And lastly, what advice would you give
to anyone? Yeah, go on.
Anyone really, like looking to, let's say they've got an idea and they want to make it come to life. I mean, what would you say your ultimate starter list would be? Let's say 2 or 3 points that you would say, look, this is what you must do.
Just get started. Just get started. Don't guess. Don't think too much. Don't start doing lots of research. Don't say it's going to be Monday. Don't say I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just go out and register the company, and then you'll want to build a website, and then you'll want to get some business cards. It sound like little things, but they will get you started. And so just that's the first piece of advice. Like I said, just focus on the next steps to get started. 2, like just network with people. And the approach that I take and I found has been really successful over the last few months is I put people in touch with people. Like, my approach to networking is, how can I help someone now? And I think in the old days, my approach to networking was a bit more like, oh, this person could help this, or this person could help that. And now I just have conversations with people, be they friends, family, business, like colleagues, former colleagues, whatever. And I'm just, having as many chats as I can with people, especially because it's COVID and you don't know what people are going through. And then at the end of the call, I always think, right, how can I help this person? Is there someone else I know that can help this person? And I've just been putting people together, and it has actually ended up in working out for me personally as well. So I think that is good. So be like, network with people, but network from a perspective of like, what can I bring to this, rather than what can they bring to me? And that's something that I've had to learn. And then so the first one was get started, and then the third one is just like, make sure you just try and enjoy it, because it's going to be shit sometimes, or a lot of the time.
Oh, definitely.
And it's going to be like really lonely, and you're not going to get it. And like, when it's shit, just back yourself. Like, okay, it's shit, but I'll figure this out. So like, the expression I always use when it's shit is like, necessity is a mother of all creation, right? So like, it is really shit. I've got no money. I'm going to lose everything in a month, or whatever it may be. But that's going to force me to come up with an idea.
Definitely.
And that idea might just be the thing that sparks everything.
Of course. And I think that's the thing about sometimes being rock bottom, isn't it? The only way is up, really, from there.
Exactly.
And I think people can sometimes let that spiral out, and understandably why. It's not something which is unheard of, or it's not something that defines you as stupid or weak, if that does happen. But
yeah,
I guess if there's someone listening to this right now, and they're thinking about a business or whatever, you've got to understand that you are going to have, as you've highlighted throughout this podcast, really, is you're going to have your bad days.
Yeah.
But it's just backing yourself. And I think in a world like today, people think backing yourself means that tomorrow I need to prove to someone that, look, I've got £100,000 from that order. That's not what backing yourself is. Backing yourself is just, you've got to keep yourself in check. You've got to keep your mind sane. You've got to be at peace within yourself. And I think if you do that, you've backed yourself to a point where no one can really bring that down, or no one can really take that away from you.
Yeah.
And I think this is such a core and sort of fundamental point of business is, how resilient are you as a person? And this is what businesses build. They build characters. And if you look around the globe at some of the most successful people, some of them are characters. And well, I think most of them are absolute characters, right? And the reason for that is because they've managed to keep themselves sane to a point where other people will see them as insane, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I love sort of listening to Richard Branson, because you look at him and you think, what an arrogant so-and-so. But it's people will look at that, right? But for me, the way I look at it, and then I'm sure a lot of people in business will look at it, be like, I see why he's like that, because to take that firm stance is how you run a corporation that size. But that doesn't reflect, what he's had to go through for that journey, for example. And I look at a lot of small businesses, especially your first sort of 5-10 years or whatever it is in a business, less than 50 employees. And I think you look at how that business started and how or where it is now.
Yeah.
And even without you realizing, when someone independent looks at that, they will see how big that change is, if that makes sense. And that change comes from your personal growth as a person. For me, it was a lot of growing up to do, because I was 24 when I started. And, watching sort of films like Wolf of Wall Street and thinking tomorrow I'm going to have, 50,000 people working for me. No, didn't happen. But the point is, with overachievers, now, one of the things very quickly to touch on before we sign off is, when someone tells you what they're aiming for in life, you almost sometimes get people rolling their eyes almost as if, okay, whatever sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But what I always look at when someone tells me something that I find a little bit hard to digest is, I think, well, what if that person just achieved 50% of that?
Yeah.
Now, I just gave my friend an example who wants to turn his company into a 10 to 15 million company. Let's say he's aiming for 10 million. Even if he achieves half of that, 50%, he's still going to have a 5 million company.
Yeah.
Which means he's going to take his company from 3 million to 5 million, which is a growth of 2 million in 1 year.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal in today's age. So when he told me he wants to make this company a 10 to 15 million company by the end of 2021, the first thing that crossed my mind was, what if he just managed 50%?
Exactly.
Even 25%, like even 15%, even if 1% he managed, it's still growth.
Exactly.
I think people don't really get that idea. And I'm not against sort of, people in jobs or in corporations who work in corporate jobs, whatever, but I find sometimes growing up in a corporate world where you're used to processes, it makes you very one-directional and makes you very one-dimensional as well in many ways.
Exactly, because anytime you grow something now, if you're in your own business, if you're growing it, you've got to build the processes yourself.
Definitely. And I think along the way, I mean, I've got friends who are, working as very high-end accountants. And then when they've gone to launch something for themselves, they found it very challenging, because all of a sudden you haven't got Susie who's going to do your printing for you, or you haven't got Tom who's going to, send your emails for you anymore.
Yeah.
You're going to be doing that yourself. You might have those people in place eventually, but the reason most businesses, in my opinion, fail within the first 5 years is a lack of leadership, a lack of direction, and a very unrealistic approach to business. And I think if you can, get past all of that, then for me, I mean, I don't see why there's any reason for you to fail in business unless you're trying to launch a product which is not ready for the market or whatever it may well be. So I always say to people, try and solve a problem, like you said a little while ago. If you're solving a problem, you have a business. It's very simple. Or create a problem to the extent where your customer has to solve it, and that
very
requires.
True.
So that's one of the things that I did when we set up the hospitality company, was I looked at, from a corporate perspective, what are corporations missing in terms of hospitality? They're missing that link where one person can really fulfill that need of bringing an event together in a way where they have the relevant contacts in each department. And that wasn't, as much as that today is a saturated market, in 2014 it was very difficult to find almost independent people who did that. You had to go through large corporations who would then send out their hospitality manager or something along those sorts. And in 2018, when I launched an investment company, me and my brother, one of the things that we looked to solve was, right, this is the age where companies like Amazon, companies like HelloFresh, companies like Alibaba are now distributing things at mass without any stores. They're distributing completely online, something which has blown up obviously in the last year with COVID especially. So one of the things that we had a vision for was, companies will require warehouses, will require commercial properties to package from, to run distribution centers from, and to possibly even ship from. So we look to solve that problem for companies. And I remember one of the commercials we brought in 2018 was a 7,000 square foot freezer. The whole warehouse was a freezer, an inbuilt freezer. And we looked at that and we thought, well, here is an opportunity with a commercial property next to a motorway, M4 links.
Yeah.
Very close to central London, very close to M25 links, very close to M40 links.
Yeah.
So we could potentially have a company come in and rent the whole of this freezer, and happy days.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we did. We got into negotiations with some of the big companies, the Asda's, the Sainsbury's, the Tesco's, and we put that outlay out there. And so it really is about trying to solve a problem. And I think one of the things people get guilty of at the very beginning is trying to almost make money. Just from the beginning, I always say to people, don't worry about the money, that will come.
Exactly.
There's no reason for it not to turn up. It will come, but you've got to be fully invested into your idea, and you've got to fully look to be solving people's problems opposed to trying to make a quick buck.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Like you said, like if you've got something that's solving a problem, and you stick through it, and you do all the things that we've been talking about and more over the last hour or so, then the money will take care of itself, because people will just come, eventually. They'll be queuing eventually if it's a big enough problem.
Brilliant. Well, with that in mind, I'm going to say I think we've covered all of our points. Unless there's anything else, Harj, you want to add?
No, just wanted to say thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it. It was good to catch up with you.
You're very welcome. And, we wish you the best the best from our side at Some Inspired to, and hope, we can discuss this, probably not on a football pitch, but another time.
Yeah, over a beer or something. Yeah, sounds good.